people. I'm John Zinsser doing an Adventures in Artland Episode 2. It's a special book report, and we're in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, Bedford Avenue, which is the main drag of hipster Brooklyn. We're in front of the Spoonbill and Sugartown bookstore, which Miles Bellamy and Jonas Kyle founded in 1999, and it's really where everybody in Williamsburg meets to look at books, poetry, art, literature. Now we're in the second location, 99 Montrose Avenue. This is the new Spoonbill second location store. This is East Williamsburg, which means that vast expanse of Brooklyn on the other side of the BQE toward Bushwick, where all the artists are moving. So I'm here with Miles Bellamy, and we're here to talk about two books that are coming out this week, basically. Both about Richard Bellamy, or Dick Bellamy as he was known, who was your father.
George.
George, really. Dick Bellamy was a famous character and art dealer in the 1960s and 70s and beyond, known for the Green Gallery, right? Which was 57th Street Gallery?
Yep.
And maybe we should try to rattle off the names of some of the artists that he worked with and showed there. I know Larry Poons. How about Richard Smith?
Richard Smith later on, yeah. Donald Judd,
yes.
Osama, Robert Morris, Mark DeSuvero, Dan Flavin.
And of course he was famously associated throughout his life with Mark DeSuvero. Later he ran Oil and Steel Gallery in Long Island City.
First on Chambers Street in Manhattan. And
okay.
Then Long Island City.
So maybe let's take a look at these books and you can talk about them. So the first book is by Judith Stein, who's a noted art historian, and she's been working on this book, 15 years?
More than that. Conceived of it about 20 years ago.
What's the title of the book?
The book is called Eye of the Sixties, Richard Bellamy and the Transformation of Modern Art. A little bit deceiving, since the book really isn't about modern art, it's about post-modern, what happened after the abstract expressionists.
And is it a biography?
It's a full-scale biography.
And so that would tell the story of, he was from the Midwest, and his mother was a Chinese trained physician, and his father as well, right?
Chinese, right? And they're both doctors.
So he came to New York, in the early 60s?
No, he came to the East Coast in the late 40s and landed in Provincetown.
Okay, I've got my history.
Landed in Provincetown and toggled back and forth between there and New York City. So in the 50s, he was pretty much ensconced in New York.
And so you born and grew up in New York.
That's right, Lower East Side. Yeah.
Now, Miles, this second book is more a personal labor of love of sorts. Serious Bidness, right? You put this book together?
I edited the book, yeah.
And it's letters?
It's a selection of his letters, some professional, some personal letters.
Beautiful cover. Now, this is a privately published book?
Printed by a bunch of ladies in Red Hook called Small Editions.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful, beautiful books.
And anything, particular example of any of the letters you could say?
Well, I just want to, a synopsis is that they're both letters to collectors, artists, and friends, and to me. So it sort of gives a brief overview of what he did with this métier. Why letters?
Yeah.
That was his what he had to work with as an art dealer.
And it also gets to the very kind of distinctiveness of his personality.
I hope so.
So Miles, one thing you were saying is, it's sort of a mad venture to open a second bookstore in a time when nobody's interested in books. And here you made a book, and it's about your father, which is also kind of like a freaky, difficult thing to do. You would refute that people are interested in that?
Well, clearly our shop's been open for 17 years, and nearly 17 years, people are buying a lot of books.
I think, part of the reason for that is because people kind of discover ideas in a place like this, right? Isn't it sort of through the interaction with these things? And so when you make a book with your father, is that kind of like a freaky experience for you to revisit?
Both of these experiences were pretty freaky. I worked closely with the biographer, Judith Stein, for about 15 years, a lot of frequent contact about this book. And I also had this book, my book, on the back burner for about 15 years, and finally pulled it together in the last couple. So yeah, bringing books into the world is it's not quite having a child, but it's quite an experience.
And the other thing you were saying about these books is it's also about a description of a particular time. And if this store is about East Williamsburg into Bushwick in 2016, the art world that you grew up in New York was a very closed society group of people, and your father was this kind of distinctive character in that. People describe, his fashion sense, his idiosyncrasies of falling asleep during studio visits, ways in which he charmed and beguiled people. And it's so difficult to kind of bring that into a present tense situation with this audience.
I had a little different perspective. I know what you're saying, but to me, he was just Dad, and he was kind of, he and the other artists were not the most stable, large, family to have. They were, you never knew who was going to be there when and what kind of behavior they were going to be doing. So I don't know, the kids had a lot to handle.
Yes, so great that you're here with us now, a more stable father.